Week 6 of the fantasy football season. His tight end starts at every matchup this week. Tight end positions definitely getting better over the last few weeks, and there's a lot of guys that are good starting options or even fringe options going into the week. First game of the week, Thursday night, Philadelphia Eagles at the New York Giants. Dallas Goedert, he's been a touchdown machine and one of the better options in this offense, better than A.J. Brown and even Devonta Smith this season. So this week at a Giant defense that can't stop anyone, him and Hurts are locked in. He's an easy start. Theo Johnson is fringe option this week. Tough matchup for Theo Johnson, this Giant team. Last week, I know he had 2 touchdowns. It was a great matchup at the New Orleans Saints. And also going back a couple weeks ago as well, he had a touchdown versus the Los Angeles Chargers with Johnson. So definitely a big target for Jackson Dart in this offense. But I think this week it's going to be tougher sledding with a tough matchup versus one of the better Ds in the league. Denver Broncos, New York Jets, London ball game, Evan Ingram. The last couple weeks, he's starting to get things going. Last week, 4 catches, 33 yards, found the end zone in a nice victory at the Philadelphia Eagles. And this week, it's a slam dunk matchup. The Jets who can't stop anyone. And we just saw Jake Ferguson last week versus Jet defense go out there for 2 touchdowns. Ingram, like I said, he hasn't been great this season, but with matchup and last week scoring a touchdown, I think he has some momentum going. He's a start. Mason Taylor a start. A lot of garbage time it's going to be for this Jet team. And they really have no one else in the passing game besides obviously Garrett Wilson, the number 1 option. And the last 2-3 weeks now, Mason Taylor stepping up and making plays for this Jet team. So this week, even in a tough matchup versus Denver, but a game where he's going to get peppered with targets and the Jets going to have to throw a lot, most likely trailing early and often. He's a start. Seattle Seahawks at the Jaguars. A.J. Bonner, all of a sudden now, the last few weeks, he's really breaking out. He's a big option for Sam Darnold in this offense, especially in the red zone. 4 touchdowns already on the season. And last week was a big breakout for Bonner, 7 for 53 and 2 touchdowns. So the first couple weeks, I thought it was a little fluky with Bonner with the touchdowns. But now we've seen him go out there and even have a legit game, like I said, with the 7 catches last week. So this week in a matchup at the Jaguars, where they're middle of the pack defense, he's a start. Brenton Strange, we saw him leave that Monday night game in Week 5 versus the Chiefs with a hip injury, so I don't know if he's going to play. And if he does play, he's a fringe option. I know he's been a good option for this Jaguar team on the offense, but like I said, even if he does play, he's not going to be 100%, and he'd be a borderline start for fantasy owners. And Johnny Munt, if Strange is out of this game, would step in as the number 1 tight end. And obviously, he hasn't been a fantasy option throughout his career with the Vikings, and even last week's ball game where he had opportunity, he didn't do much in the receiving game. Los Angeles Chargers at the Dolphins, Aranda Gatson, Tyler Conklin, both since. Gatson had a decent game a few weeks ago, 5 catches, 46 yards, but ever since then, he hasn't really been doing much for this Charger team. I know this Charger team's going to throw the football even more, most likely, with Hampton out on IR at least 4 more games. But still, these tight ends, they haven't been used consistently to be options, even in a good matchup at the Dolphins. Darren Waller, since he's been back in the lineup the last 2 weeks, looks like a great option in this offense. And obviously with Tyreek Hill out for the season, they needed someone to step up in the receiving game. And Darren Waller's done that now. 3 touchdowns in his first 2 games back. So he was retired this season. It looks like he hasn't missed a step. And a big 6'6", 6'7" target in the red zone. You know he's going to go out there and make plays. Los Angeles Rams at the Ravens, Tyler Higbee, Davis Allen sits. I've said this weekly, when you got Puka Nacua and Devontae Adams, those guys are going to get 75-80% of the targets and the catches for this Los Angeles Ram team. So Higbee has had some good years throughout his career, but nothing more than a guy will get a couple catches a game and more blocking. And Davis Allen, he's had a couple touchdowns this season, but him as well, not much in the receiving game. Mark Andrews a fringe option with Cooper Rush in their quarterback. Obviously, people's values go down, even though Cooper Rush is a capable quarterback. But Mark Andrews, this season, to begin the year, he didn't do much the first 2-3 weeks of the season. And then last week, only a 4.20 fantasy day. So this week versus the Rams, maybe he could go out there and surprise. But his upside isn't great. He's a fringe option. Arizona Cardinals at the Indianapolis Colts. 2 top 5 tight ends in this matchup. Trey McBride, the last couple weeks, the numbers haven't been great. Him and Murray got to get back connected. We'll see if Murray plays for sure in this game with a foot injury, but I think he will. And Trey McBride, we know he can run all the routes. We know he's a matchup problem for linebackers, safeties, whoever you put on him. And he's due for a bigger game as Trey McBride. So this week at the Colts, even though the defense is playing well, he's a start. Obviously, Tyler Warren a start. Warren, impressive rookie so far in the early going. And like I said, he's a top 5 option, worst case, where in my opinion, he's a top 3-4 option is Tyler Warren. Him and Daniel Jones are locked in. Big red zone threat, good blocker, and they've lined him up at fullback as well at times. So he's a versatile tight end. They move all around the field, and this week in a good matchup versus Arizona, I expect another good game out of Dallas Cowboys at the Carolina Panthers. So with CeeDee Lamb out the last couple weeks, Ferguson, his targets have gone up, and he's finding the end zone. Last week, 2 touchdowns. Then going back in that game versus Green Bay in Week 4, found the end zone. And this week in a great matchup at the Carolina Panthers, one of the worst defenses in the league. Jake Ferguson, he's going to be a top 3-5 option this week as well. A must start. Tommy Trimble is sit. Trimble's still filling in Tavian Sanders. And this offense, obviously behind Tetora McMillan, needs someone to step up as a number 2 option, but Trimble really hasn't been that guy. And this week, even in a great matchup versus the Cowboys, where their defense isn't any good and one of the worst in the league, he's a sit. New England Patriots at the New Orleans Saints. Hunter Henry a start. Hunter Henry a great option in this offense with young quarterback Drake May. No, last week he didn't do much, but he had a crucial catch late in that game. 2 catches, 45 yards. But Hunter Henry, big red zone threat. Guy that obviously Drake May, young quarterback, relies on in third down situations and in the red zone. And this week in New Orleans, a defense that just gave up 2 touchdowns to Theo Johnson last week, the tight end. He's a start. Juwan Johnson, Taysom Hill sits. Juwan Johnson, first 2-3 weeks of the season, he came out with some big ball games, but now teams, obviously, they're starting to get on to what Johnson's been doing. And the last couple weeks, he hasn't done much. Taysom Hill returned to the lineup last week as well, which takes touches away from everyone in this offense one way or another. And this week, both these guys are sits. Taysom Hill, we know, has had some big games throughout his career, but not someone you really could trust, especially coming off an ACL injury as well. Cleveland Browns at the Pittsburgh Steelers. David Njoku will start. Last week, it was a big ball game for David Njoku. When he's a big target and a young quarterback like Dylan Gabriel, he's going to rely on his security blanket in the tight end position more times than not. So this week, even with the tough matchup, Njoku, I think he could work the middle of the field. He could go out there and make plays, and he's still one of the better yard after catch tight ends in the league. Harold Fanning Jr., a fringe option. Last week, he found the end zone, but it was a low-volume game. 4 catches, 13 yards, and that first quarter touchdown, it was for Harold Fanning Jr. So this week at Pittsburgh, at best, he's a fringe option. Jonnu Smith, Pat Freiermuth are sits. Aaron Rodgers, I've said this in other videos, he really hasn't used the tight end position for many seasons. Going back with the last few years with the Packers, the Jets last season, and so far this season he hasn't. So DK Metcalf and the running game pretty much have been the only viable options over there in Pittsburgh. Tennessee Titans at the Raiders. Chigga Kwango is hit. This offense just inconsistent. It's been all season long. The only pretty much guy you start week in and week out is Tony Pollard. I know Calvin Ridley finally had a breakout game, over 120 yards last week receiving. And this week I know it's a good matchup, but Okongwu, he really hasn't been fantasy relevant for a while. Now to the Raiders, if Brock Bowers plays, he's a start in this one. The knee really banged up that he sat out last week's ball game. And now Pete Carroll saying he's week to week is Bowers. So in my opinion, it's not looking great. He's going to play this week versus the Tennessee Titans, but obviously if he does, even at 70-80%, still could go out there and outproduce majority of the tight ends in fantasy football. And if he's out, Michael Mayer, Ian Thomas are going to fill in. I know Mayer was out last week with a concussion, possibly could return, but these guys don't really have upside, obviously, with Bowers out of the lineup. 49ers at the Bucks, Jake Tongs, he's been playing well, filling in for George Kittle, and most likely Kittle's going to just be out this week and return in the next ball game for the San Francisco 49er team. So Tongs last week, 11 targets, had a big ball game, double-digit fantasy points, 3 out of the 5 games he's played in this season. And this week could be a high-scoring game between these two teams. So Tongs a fringe option, K-Dot in the sit. Last week he finally had a game where he went out there and put up some numbers, but the first 4 weeks he was non-existent, was K-Dot. And Emeka Egbuka, the number 1 option in this passing game. Mike Evans could be back this week, but I think it's most likely next week. And also as well, Rachaad White, he's going to catch the football out of the backfield, make plays. And Baker Mayfield's just that quarterback that spreads it out. But K-Dot, I know it was a good game last week, but still not a guy that's going to be in the lineup. Cincinnati Bengals at the Packers, Mike Gesicki is hit. Pretty much everyone on this offense has been non-existent besides Jamar Chase and a little bit of Chase Brown over the last couple weeks. So this week in a tough matchup with the Green Bay Packers, Gesicki Like I said, he hasn't done much all season long. He's a sit. Tucker Kraft to start. A great matchup versus Cincinnati Bengals. Arguably the number one option in the passing offense is Tucker Kraft. A good tight end, yard after catch ability. Jordan Love's still a young quarterback. He's going to target that tight end position. And this week for Cincinnati, I think Kraft could go out there and have a monster game. Detroit Lions at the Chiefs. Sam Laporta finally had a big game last week, 92 yards. Found the end zone in victory at the Cincinnati Bengals. So Laporta, only 2 good games it's been this season, and the rest, he's failed to reach double-digit fantasy points in PPR leagues. And obviously it's tough when you got great guys on this offense. Jahmyr Gibbs, Montgomery as your backfield. Amon-Ra St. Brown, one of the better receivers in the league. Even Jameson Williams, even though it's been a down year for him. But this week at Kansas City, I think Laporta could exploit those linebackers a little bit. He's a start. Travis Kelce a start. I know Kelce at this point, it seems like he's a touchdown-dependent tight end, but still a guy who always has upside weekly. Him and Patrick Mahomes of all time in NFL. And even if Kelce, his snaps are down, all the route participation's down, he's still a guy that's going to go out there and make plays week to week, where he's a top 8, top 10 option. He's a start. Buffalo Bills at the Falcons, Dalton Kincaid to start. Last week, a big game it was for Dalton Kincaid. And arguably, he could be the number one option in the passing game for this Buffalo Bill team is Kincaid. He could run all the routes. He's a matchup problem. First-round pick a few seasons ago as well from this Buffalo Bill team. And it just seems like weekly, him and Josh Allen are locking in and making plays. So this week at the Falcon defense, which isn't that good, and it's a fast track over there in Atlanta, he's a start. Kyle Pitts a start. Kyle Pitts, it's been a decent season for him so far. Scored a touchdown versus the Commanders in the Week 4 victory. Now coming off by this offense regroup, get things going. And I think Kyle Pitts, with Michael Penix in there quarterback, he has a shot to be a decent option weekly. And this week, in a game most likely trailing and chasing points, I would give him the nod. Chicago Bears at the Commanders to close out the week on Monday night. Cole Kmet, Colston Loveland is sits. Cole Kmet really hasn't seen much from him. And Colston Loveland, he hasn't been much in the playbook. Not a lot of route participation for Loveland. But now after the bye week, rookies get into the playbook more. And maybe Loveland gets into the playbook for the Chicago Bear team, gets more reps and more targets. But obviously, it's a wait-and-see approach with him, and I wouldn't put him in the starting lineup this week. And Zach Ertz is a fringe option. Zach Ertz had a couple good games this season, but a couple games as well, he didn't do much. Deebo Samuel, obviously the number one option in the passing game. Terry McLaurin possibly could return to the lineup. Is McLaurin this week. And also after coming off a goose egg last week at best to me, even in a good matchup versus the Bears defense, stop anyone. Zach Ertz is a fringe option, so that's tight end starts hit every matchup for week 6 of the fantasy football season.